This is Jim Axelrod. The security fence surrounding the Supreme Court is all you need to see to understand the gravity of what unfolded in Washington this past week. While the court may have decided a presidential election in the last quarter century and ruled on who could legally marry whom, the draft leaked Monday night, suggesting Roe v. Wade could soon be overturned.
The Republicans have been working toward this day for decades.
Elicited an emotional intensity reaching even deeper and more broadly across the country.
Abortion is violent!
If you ask most Americans to name a Supreme Court decision, the vast majority will name Roe v. Wade. It's the only Supreme Court decision that's dominated Supreme Court confirmation hearings and presidential elections for decades.
University of California, Davis law professor Mary Ziegler.
What is the legal reasoning underpinning the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
The legal reasoning comes down to the idea that the court says that there are only a limited subset of rights that are recognized in our Constitution, and those are ones that have been deeply rooted in our nation's tradition and history.
Our rights are not up for debate!
Which explains that intensity for so many, wondering if one long-established protection is overturned, what's next?
We don't know if this court is going to stop with reversing Roe. We know that there are at least some justices on the court who would like to reverse a whole variety of other decisions on issues from criminalizing same-sex sex to banning same-sex marriage.
Somebody who says to you, relax, this isn't a slippery slope. What do you say to them?
Well, I say it's unpredictable, and I say that if you had spoken to many Americans 5 years ago and said Roe v. Wade would be overturned in Amy Coney Barrett's first abortion decision on the Supreme Court, they would have said, well, that's ridiculous, right? That's politically unnecessary and risky for a court that's reputation has already been damaged, and yet here we are.
Did you see this coming?
Everyone saw coming the possibility that the court might overturn Roe by a 5-4 vote. I certainly didn't see coming that the decision was going to leak.
As president of the nonpartisan National Constitution Center, Jeffrey Rosen won't take a side on what the draft says, but he's withering in his criticism of how we found out.
Court's internal deliberations are its most sacrosanct product, and it's impossible for a court to function if early drafts leak.
For Rosen, the leak and who did it is no sideshow distraction from the main issues. It's a grave threat to how the court works. In private, so justices have room to recast, rework, and revise their opinions.
There have been many motives that have been bandied around, but one is that after 5 justices voted to overturn Roe v. Wade, Chief Justice Roberts is now trying to convince some of them to change their mind and to join him in a more moderate opinion. The leaker is trying to make it harder for any swing justices to peel off and change their minds.
In an appointment which could turn the Supreme Court to the right for years to come.
Wanting to end the court's highly partisan era often traced back to hearings for conservative Judge Robert Bork.
Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions.
Rosen says Robert's mission has been to broker opinions that reflect consensus, favoring 8-1 decisions so much more than 5-4.
Chief Justice Roberts said, we've got to be narrow, we have to be modest, we have to be incremental, or we're going to run the risk of a tremendous threat to our legitimacy.
But that's the opposite of where we find ourselves this Sunday morning, with the court quite possibly close to an expansive, sweeping decision that will overturn a protection that's been in place for half a century, one Americans feel strongly about. Law professor Mary Ziegler.
The court has historically not been that untethered from what people tend to think, especially when the court is inserting itself into virtually every major issue of the day, from guns to affirmative action to abortion to the rights of LGBT people to voting rights to the regulation of climate change. I mean, the court is literally in every conversation we're having, and it's operating in ways we haven't seen in the recent past.
But as Americans have repeatedly learned the last few years, the recent past is no longer the best guide to how we'll function in the future.
This will be something that professors of constitutional law and indeed professors of any kind of law will be talking about probably for more than 100 years from this conversation.